As I'm very sure a lot of us have seen, hook grip has gotten incredibly popular in powerlifting. We get to see a lot of the very best lifters in the world using it to help pull some massive weights, and even in some cases, a big world record. I think it has led to there being a unfair amount of hype and expectation around the hook grip being utilized for a lot of people. I'm not saying it can't do a lot of good for a lot of good deadlifters out there, but I think there really needs to be a distinction for who needs to use it and who can actually benefit. So today we'll talk about the ins and outs, pros and cons of both hook grip and mixed grip to kind of help you figure out what's the actual best grip style for you. So first, let's briefly discuss what each grip style actually is. Hook grip, in its simplest way of describing it, is we're almost legitimately using our thumb as a type of hook, or I think an even easier analogy would be like a lifting strap. We're basically trying to use gravity and friction to essentially pinch our thumb in between the barbell and our middle finger and sometimes our index finger to essentially not let that bar have any way to spin or to roll. That's really kind of the overall challenge with trying to grip a barbell for anything, is that it wants to roll, it has those bearings for trying to spin and roll in either direction. And the same thing with the mixed grip. It's way more common and way easier to learn, but it's trying to do the exact same thing. We have one overhand, we have one underhand. That way it won't be trying to roll out of the underhand, it won't be trying to roll out of the overhand. It's essentially rolling into itself to where it has no way to really roll or spin and keeping that bar as stable as possible. So with mixed grip being that much more simple and that much more common, why has hook grip gotten to be that popular? As I alluded to earlier, some of the best and most successful deadlifters in the world, they utilize it when they're doing some of those entertaining deadlifts that we've ever seen. And obviously there's plenty of great deadlifters who don't use it, but there's definitely been a very large shift within the sport. I'd say the last 5 years to where we've seen a very large amount of hook grip pullers coming out and about. So, and with all that excitement and all this hype, I think as a lot of us wrongfully do in a lot of cases, we try to emulate the people that we see doing these big, heavy pulls and trying to be the best just like them. So what are the actual benefits of hook grip? How does it help all these lifters, especially the sumo ones, really maximize the amount they're able to deadlift? The most obvious benefit and the most kind of glaring one is how much it drastically changes and improves our positioning off of the floor. And I do think that is why we see it way more commonly with a sumo deadlifter than we do any sort of conventional one, because that's where we get that much more benefit from having that much of a more upright and closer to the bar type of setup. And really, a lot of that comes from that if we aren't having to externally rotate one arm, we're going to, just from having both those arms being overhand, we're creating a good sense of length there. But as well as it really allows our scapular, our shoulder blades to create that much more length. Since we're kind of both overhand on both, we're able to protract that much more, create that much more length in each arm. That way we're going to just add, or we're going to take away for more so a good inch from range of motion just from that. Then even further on top of that, the way the hook grip is best set in most cases is when we're setting it as low in our hand as possible. That way it doesn't have anywhere to really spin or roll to. We're really kind of cutting it off at that choke point. So not only is it going to be allowing us to have longer arms per se, we're going to be setting it that much further down in the hands to where we're going to be able to create maybe 2 extra inches of arm length, and that therefore decreasing 2 extra inches on our range of motion. And actually, here is a really good example of my client, Colin, who he's a fantastic hook grip deadlifter. He's pulling upwards of 700 pounds at 165, but we did have a pretty bad thumb tear at our most recent meet, so we did go into a block utilizing mixed grip just to let it rest and kind of see, hey, maybe this is a viable option in the future. We'll just see if we can bring some stability to everything. But here is just a difference in his positioning from a relatively same angle. Sure, these lifts were done, I'd say, about 6 to 8 weeks apart, but here is, if we just look at his upper back, if we look at his elbow positioning, if we look at this compared to his hook grip to his mixed grip, we see that he has an insane extra amount of just body uprightness, and see how much higher his elbow is set on his hook grip deadlift. That's essentially that much less range of motion that he has to have. So obviously, as any of us that have, pulled from, a block before, essentially for lifting the weights up, or people have used both a power bar and a deadlift bar for, deadlifting, we can see that we felt that there is a large difference in having that 1 inch or 2 inches of less range of motion, how much more truly powerful it can make us from the beginning positioning of the deadlift. So while we are on the topic of the long arms and the shoulder positioning, that is where I'd say one of the cons is that does need to be worked through and actually trained and have that very specific skill to make sure that we're working around it. But with there being that extra protraction, those scapulas being that much further forward to create all that extra length due to both sides being internally rotated and having, once again, trying to set that hook that much better, we'll see that those shoulders now displaced that much further forward. So that's also why you'll see Colin, as well as a lot of especially lighter weight sumo deadlifters, they really have to pull themselves way, way back when they lock out. And that's not necessarily to create a strength differential or something like that, or trying to leverage different strength style to make sure that they're actually locking it out. It's if they were actually had their rib cage stacked on top of their pelvis, you'd see that their shoulders are still in that forward position. And if we have 600-700 pounds in our hands, we can't necessarily just depend on just some little rhomboids to pull those shoulders back every time to make sure that we have that more ideally locked out position. So you'll see that these people that do have especially a very large deadlift in comparison to their weight, they have to do this very exaggerated lean back position to help kind of provide that just vision, and I don't want to say illusion, but I think that's the best word here, of having those shoulders stacked directly on top of the hips and having that directly on top of the foot to where we have that locked out position to make the side judges happy. And another relatively common pro, I'd say, to the hook grip is that we are now having both sides being trained very evenly. In most cases, I think that having the mixed grip, there's going to be a lot of, I guess, mental struggling with thinking that, hey, I'm training this left side or this right side slightly different from one another, and people take an issue with that more so than they think they do. But even then, let's say that there's a left bicep injury or just a left shoulder injury, having that side be an overhand is going to immediately help take some strain off of that and put it in a slightly more comfortable position for most people. I don't think I've ever seen any sort of like bicep tear when it comes to there being any sort of a hook grip, but I think that anybody that's watched a high level untested meet especially, I'm almost afraid to watch all the third attempt deadlifts just because I'm sitting there watching bicep tendons and hoping they hold on. And I've even seen that amongst men pulling 800 plus pounds. I've seen that with women pulling 600 pounds. I've just seen that bicep tendon pop off with the mixed grip. So obviously there's not near that worry there that we'll have to deal with on the hook grip. But I'd say kind of the biggest con of the hook grip completely is not only it takes a very physical type of demand that is going to be very individually based. Say if their fingers or hands are too thick or too fat, for lack of a better term, there's a lot more girth there that makes it very tough to kind of create that length and create that position and create that friction of being able to sit deep enough within the hand. And even if somebody has shorter fingers or anything like that, there's a lot of variety there that really takes a pretty specific hand style to be able to have a very effective hook grip. So I'd say for a lot of the people that do attempt to use a hook grip, they feel so uncertain and unconfident, which creates a whole myriad of problems on its own of them just not having consistent positioning out of the bottom because they're so focused on their hook. All they're thinking about is their hook, to where they'll mess up their hip height, they'll mess up their slack pull, they'll mess up all these other things that are very, very important for a successful deadlift. Now, with that being said, there definitely is a very specific demographic that we see more often than not that utilizes any sort of a hook grip. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be more often than not, way more often than not, some sort of a sumo deadlifter. I don't think there's very many top level or even any conventional deadlifters that really utilize a hook grip. I can think of two very good, nationwide tested lifters that I know that utilize a hook grip for conventional deadlift. But other than that, the vast majority of conventional deadlifters utilize a mixed grip. Just once again, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. There's really having that inconsistency or needing that skill type to really force, an extra inch range of motion on conventional deadlift isn't nearly as helpful as it could be for a sumo deadlift. I do think that, as I mentioned earlier, with the hand type, we see that a lot of the heaviest lifters, a lot of the people that are well over 140 kilos or heavier, on the women's side that are 100 kilos or heavier, we'll see that there's really never any sort of hook grip there. Once again, just having bigger hands, thicker hands, there's going to be a lot of extra challenges into creating that hook to where it's just not really worth it at the end of the day. And even further than that, I cannot think of a single high top-end female deadlifter that uses a hook grip. I literally not a single one. I can think of 10 incredible, more than that, 15 incredible women deadlifters off the top of my head, both tested and untested, and not a single one of them use a hook grip. So there's also another big, outlier there. So sorry, women, this video might not be for you as much or as helpful for you, but we'll see that women, especially once again, just smaller hands in comparison to the barbell, just trying to force that hook grip isn't nearly as easy or nearly worth the attempt to do it. So let's talk about mixed grip a little bit more then. What are the pros there? And I've already alluded to this a little bit. This is a little bit more simple, but it is just so dang stable and simple. Obviously, I think that there's still some kind of nuance there and maybe some similarities too of just saying, hey, maybe having it sit a little bit lower in the hand, not trying to set it as deep high up in the hand, and trying to really make sure that we're not letting that bar have as many options to drop to or to roll to. There's going to be a lot of benefit there, but overall, very easy to learn, very easy to apply. I'd say a big con with it is, yeah, we might have a little bit more pressure on a wider variety of calluses, so maybe some options for some more torn calluses there, but as well as it does rely on a bit more just actual grip strength. You're going to have to squeeze the bar in some capacity. Not as much I think you need to on the hook grip. Once again, neither one I don't think you should be trying to grip as hard as you could, but I think you can be a little bit more passive on the hook grip than we do on the mixed grip. Once again, here's where I'd say is the biggest con for a mixed grip person. Obviously, there's stuff about injuries, which we already kind of discussed a lot with the hook grip and kind of the pros of it. There might be a bit more risk of injury there and a little bit more, I guess, optionality or chance of there being a bit of unevenness due to one arm being technically shortened from that external rotation there. But I'd say more than anything, if you are a sumo deadlifter and if you have relatively big quads or if you have broad shoulders, what we'll see so often is that underhand, it's going to have to eventually, your hands are going to have to eventually touch your legs, right? And for most people, those legs are going to have to glide up on top of the quads, especially on a sumo deadlifter. So if you're one of the guys that has very broad shoulders, that means that you're going to have to grab the bar that much wider. And that means you're going to be touching your leg that much earlier because your arms are inside your legs. So we'll see if you have big quads, you got those broad shoulders, that underhand side is going to get pushed away from your body significantly compared to the overhand side. So we're going to see a bit of a helicoptering effect toward that underhand side that's going to be pushed away from the body. Now, obviously, this is a sport where we're trying to have that center mass being as lined up with your body center mass as closely as possible. It's going to be where our best chance of exerting as much force in the barbell really lies. So having that one side get pushed away 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches is going to really make that lockout a lot more challenging. So that's where if you have the ability to do some sort of a hook grip, you'll see that, hey, having both sides be technically overhand, have that nice internal rotation, we're going to remove so much of those hands brushing up against the legs, and even I think remove a lot of the needing to grab it so wide. You can kind of reach in quite a bit using a hook grip as well. So I think to really summarize this, once again, there's a lot of nuance here, so there might be some little differences that you need to figure out on your own. But I think a really good kind of broad, just kind of paint onto here is if you are a conventional deadlifter, and especially if you are a female deadlifter, there's a really good chance that you will not need hook grip or benefit a lot from it. Once again, there's very few conventional deadlifters that use it or need it, and I just think that added positioning is not going to really give you any benefit for how much stress the hook grip can provide. But if you are a sumo deadlifter, and especially if you're not some massive guy and you have the right hands or anything like that, it might be worth a shot. Really think about, what does my lockout look like? What does my start position look like? How much less strain could I possibly give some of my musculature just by being that much more upright? Kind of alluding back to my client Colin, since we did do this entire block of being mixed grip, it's funny with him just being that much more pitched forward and having that much lower shoulder positioning, just the amount of extra fatigue he's seen in his glutes and hams and even his spinal erectors just from being that slightly much more pitched over. So it's kind of added stress. It's made it a little bit tougher to work around his squat and stuff, this block. Just do that. Obviously, I think a lot of that comes just from an adaptation standpoint. This is really his first time doing heavy mixed grips in a very long time, to where we did have that added challenge there and added need for the demand on the tissue. But if you see a lot of these kind of consistencies here, hey, I do have some, maybe some smaller hands or some longer fingers or things like that, and I do have, a pretty pitch forward position on deadlift. Trying to learn the hook grip might be a very, very good thing for you.